There was a systemic program of torture under John Burge that spanned for 20 years, and the kind of torture was electric shock, baggings over the head, mock executions, sticking guns in people's mouths, beating them with rubber hoses and sticks, always racially motivated. Racial slurs were being used. Lots of times there was attack on the genital areas with electric shocks, with beatings, with kickings. It started out with Anthony Holmes, and it went up through 1983 when Darrell Cannon was tortured at a remote torture site on the south side of Chicago, and then it went all the way to 1991 when a 13-year-old victim was tortured with electric shock under Burge's command.
They drove me to a site that I call the torture area, where it's a big, huge pipe. You drive through and come out on the other side. There's a river, and they went up this hill. And the railroad tracks was right there. They turned the car around, they parked there, they got me out, and they told me, they said, "Nigga, look around." And I looked around, and it was an isolated area. They told me nobody will hear or know anything about what has happened to you. And then that's when they started to ask me about the murder.
This is the tunnel that the Burge and his men, or actually John Byrne and Peter Dignan, brought Darrell in to torture him. They drove through this tunnel here. They took him through the tunnel, up this dirt road area, up near those railroad tracks. They took him out of the car, and then they tortured him with the mock execution with a shotgun and with electric shock.
And one of the first things they did was they tried to hang me up by the back of my arms. My arms were handcuffed behind me, and Sergeant Burns got on the bumper. Now what I remember about that day is that it was a fine mist rain, real fine, but it was cold outside. They tried to hold me on each side while Burns held the handcuffs from behind, and they would let me go, and that would make my arms come up behind me, but they wasn't successful in doing that. Burns almost slipped off the bumper. So then they went and they opened the trunk of the detective car, and Dignan, that's one of the detectives involved, got out a shotgun, and he told me, he said, "Nigga, look," and he showed me the shotgun shell. He said, "Now listen, nigga," and he turned around, and I thought he was putting a shell up in the shotgun because it sounded like that to me. Then he turned back around and said, "Nigga, you gonna tell us what we want to hear?" When I replied no, this is when he shoved the shotgun in my mouth. And when he shoved it in my mouth, he kept saying, "You gonna tell me what we want to hear? You gonna tell me what we want to hear?" And when I refused to do so, one of the other ones told him, "Pull the trigger, blow that nigga's head off." And they pulled the trigger. They did this on 3 separate occasions. And the third time they did it, it seemed like when I heard the trigger click that the back of my brains was being blown out. That's what my mind was telling me. And as a result from that, I could feel my hair standing up on my head. At that time, I had a lot of hair, you know, not short like this here. And I could actually feel it sticking up. After that wasn't successful, they took me around to the passenger side, the back seat, on the passenger side of the car, and it was Burns that took an automatic and put it to my head and told me don't move. And they redid the handcuffs from from behind me in front of me. And then at that point they made me sit down in the back seat of the car. They had pulled my pants and my shorts down, and it was one of them that's dead now, Grunhardt, had went around to the other side of the back door, opened the door, and he came in, and they made me sit down, and my hands was up in the air, and he grabbed them. After I sit down, he grabbed them, and so they pulled me back, made me lay down, and he had to handcuff my hands so I couldn't rise back up. And it was Sergeant Burns that first used the electric caliper on me, and at that time he stuck it to my testicles,